All right, so we set up our PowerPoint for our literary analysis, and you put your name and your class period on the front as well. Yesterday, I gave you the thesis template. So remember, you are using this thesis template. Edgar Allan Poe uses literary techniques such as blank, blank, and blank in order to propel the plot and develop theme. We also set up your other slides for later paragraphs. So we have body paragraph 1, 2, 3, and then the conclusion, okay? And remember, on your body paragraph slides, you have TS, EV, EL, EV, EL. So that stands for topic, sentence, evidence, elaboration, evidence, elaboration. What I'm going to do with you today is we are actually going to write one of these together. That way you can see what your paragraphs need to look like later on. I'm hoping that by doing this together, you'll see what quality elaboration should look like and be able to model your next 2 paragraphs after that. So you can copy exactly what I'm doing for the first body paragraph. I'm going to use the literary technique of setting. Remember that these 3 literary techniques come directly from your literary analysis planning with the 6 boxes. You're choosing 3 of them. So the first one that we're going to be doing together is setting. So if you don't have setting in your thesis now, I would go ahead and swap whichever one you would like for setting. I'm assuming a lot of you probably picked setting, but if not, you can go ahead and swap it. If at any point you have questions while we're talking, please speak up in the mic, ask your questions, because other people probably have them as well. So does everybody have their PowerPoint pulled up and ready to start with body paragraph 1? All right, so for our topic sentence, we are going to say Edgar Allan Poe uses setting to do what? What was our prompt that we're focusing on? And what are we trying to relate those literary techniques to?
To propel the plot and develop themes.
Yes, so that comes directly from our thesis and from the prompt. So to propel plot and develop themes. So that means that our evidence should be focused on setting, and then our elaboration should explain how our evidence is moving the plot forward of the story and how our evidence is also developing theme. Hey, Nacier, all you need to do right now is just open up a PowerPoint presentation, and you can just start on this slide, and I can help you with the other ones a little later on. So if you just open up a PowerPoint presentation and write what we have right here. Thank you. So do you want to use the telltale heart first or the black cat first? I feel like Anjali's the only one talking to me today.
The telltale heart.
Thank you. Okay, so let's use the telltale heart. What example can you think of from the telltale heart when that relates to setting? What would be important about the setting of the telltale heart? as far as the story goes? What could be a great piece of evidence that we would use? I'm thinking of something that the narrator in The Telltale Heart did with the setting, with the house. What did he do?
Maybe how he hid the body under the floorboards.
I think that would be the perfect piece of evidence. He hid the body of the old man underneath the floorboards, and that directly relates to the setting of the house, right? So we can say, in The Telltale Heart, Poe writes, and then if you had your copy of The Telltale Heart pulled up, you would be able to copy and paste directly from there. I believe that this piece of evidence, I have the physical paper in front of me, so that's why it's a little different for me, but with the physical paper, this is on page 18, but I know your copy looks a little different, but it's towards the beginning or middle, but we can say, I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between scantlings. I can also copy this evidence into the chat. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. So that's a great piece of evidence. I copy and pasted that piece of evidence into the chat for you. That way you don't have to type that whole thing out. So how does the setting of that piece of evidence, how does the setting relate to the plot? Remember, plot is the exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution, the events of the story. How can we relate the setting, the information about the setting in that piece of evidence to the plot? It's a difficult question, I know.
Miss Pickard, I think it would be considered like the falling action.
Okay. So what makes you think that this is the falling action? Because you're right.
Because, yeah, I think the climax is when he actually kills the old man, and then the resolution would be when the cops came and like when he turned himself in or whatever.
Yeah, so 100%. Was somebody else about to say something? Okay. Yeah, 100%. This is part of the falling action because the climax is when he kills the old man. That is like the height of the story. And this is the very beginning of the falling action. So in our elaboration, there's two things that we want to be doing. We want to be talking about how that literary technique moves the plot forward and how that literary technique develops theme. So the first step for plot, like she was saying, we can say that this shows how Poe uses setting to propel plot by this shows how Poe uses setting to propel plot by incorporating the house, which is the setting, right, into the falling action and using the floorboards to hide the corpse. So that piece of elaboration is directly saying how the setting of the house relates to the falling action, right? Because our narrator is hiding the corpse in the floorboards, which is part of the setting. So what did I say was the second part of our elaboration? What do we have to do next?
Explain how it develops theme.
Exactly. So we can say that the narrator's decision to hide the body in this manner, which just means in this way, contributes to Poe's development of theme. So I said the narrator's decision to hide the body in this manner contributes to Poe's development of theme. That sentence is almost like a transition between the plot and the theme. But the next sentence is one of the most important because we are going to say what theme is established and how. What theme he's developing here and how. But I'm going to give you some time to get that ready before we go into that step. If at any point I'm moving too fast, please let me know. If you are finished and ready to move on, I want you to be thinking of different abstract noun themes that we could put right here that relate to this piece of evidence. Think of a few themes in the form of an abstract noun that relate to this piece of evidence. There's two main ones that I can think of, but I want to hear what you think. All right, what abstract nouns do you think relate to the theme of this piece of evidence? I'm going to write them here, so shout out whichever ones you think relate, and I will type them right here.
I thought of arrogance because he was so confident that no one could detect anything wrong.
Okay, perfect. Because he's kind of being confident or cocky and saying that nobody can detect anything wrong, so maybe arrogance. What other themes were you guys thinking of when you read this piece of evidence? Nobody wants to guess? So some that we had talked about in the past were insanity, obsession, guilt, remorse, which is like the same thing as guilt. What else? What other ones did we talk about? I'm not saying they directly apply to this, but just some that we found in his work in general. We had that.
Violence.
Yeah, violence was one. We had a list that I showed you guys, and there were several. I have so many documents. Here they are, abstract nouns. Remember? So we talked about paranoia, dread, despair, loneliness, justice or injustice, anxiety, arrogance, rage, consequence, adversity. There were so many. So originally, the two that I thought of when I read this piece of evidence, I took up 3 planks from the flooring, deposited it between the scantlings, replaced the board so cleverly, cunningly that no human eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. Like Anjali, I did think of arrogance, and I also thought of obsession. Why do you think I thought of obsession?
Because he's always been obsessed with the eye for the whole short story.
Yeah, he was obsessed with the eye, and here he's saying that no human eye could detect anything wrong. But this little addition that says not even his, that's what made me think of obsession, because he's referring to the old man, but this is the falling action, right? So he already killed the old man. It's pretty obsessive to say, well, his eye can't see anything wrong when he's dead, right? Of course he can't see anything wrong. So what we can do is choose either one of those. And again, you could probably find other themes that you could relate to this, but those are the two that stuck out in my mind. So do we want to focus on arrogance or obsession? Either one is totally fine.
I think obsession.
Okay. So the theme of obsession, we could say, is established by the narrator's intense focus on the old man's eye, even after death. Intense focus on the old man's eye, even after death. Oh, Nicholas, I didn't see your comment there. Thank you for adding that. Because he's obsessed with eye and covering up his murder, of course. Yep. If you were going to say arrogance instead, you could say something like, the theme of arrogance is established by the narrator's persistent confidence and cockiness in his behaviors and description of his actions, right? And there you would be referring to him saying so cleverly, so cunningly that no one could have detected anything wrong. So either one would be totally fine and perfect. So we're going to do another piece of evidence and elaboration together, and it's going to be from the black cat. I know some of you may still be getting this, and that's okay, but what piece of evidence from the black cat do you think would be really important in showing how setting can give us clues about the plot? How setting can give us clues or hints about the plot?
You could use the setting where they were, where he was in the jail.
Yeah, I think that would be the perfect piece of evidence. Remember that line that said, like, even in this felon's cell? That piece of evidence from the black cat gives us information about the setting. It told us that he was writing this story. The narrator was telling his story from jail in the black cat. And that gave us clues to be able to infer that later on he would be arrested of a crime. And I know you might not remember that far back, but that piece of evidence was before he killed his wife in the black cat, right? So we were able to learn that he was going to be convicted of a crime before he actually committed the crime. So again, if you were doing this on your own, you could go back through the text, go back to your copy of the black cat, and you would find that piece of evidence and copy and paste it. But again, because I have it printed out in front of me, I know that it is on page 7. And I love that you guys found the exact evidence that I was thinking of using. Can I leave the link to the video in the chat? Is that what you're saying, Sophia? Or what link in the chat?
Can you leave your YouTube link in the chat? Because I was trying to.
Oh. Yeah, so my YouTube thing, I will post it in the chat. The video that I'm going to post for 6th period, I can also post for you guys on Schoology of this information if you need it. And that way, if you need to go back and look at any of this, you can. So I can post that for you guys as well. But it's not going to be up until after 5th period, because that's my planning period.
Okay, thank you. That's fine.
You're welcome. So in the black cat, we can say Poe writes, even in this felon's cell, I am almost ashamed to own. So remember, in our elaboration, our main goal is to show how this piece of evidence moves the plot forward and how it develops theme. So we can say this also shows how Poe uses setting to drive plot. Sometimes our essays can get very repetitive if we keep using the same phrases over and over again. So if I keep saying propel plot, propel plot, propel plot, it just feels a little redundant, right? So sometimes adding synonyms can be helpful when you're writing your essays. So Poe uses setting to drive plot by providing the reader with insight into what part of the plot does this give us a clue about? What, if you're thinking about a plot diagram with exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution, what part are we getting a clue from when it says even in this felon's cell?
Resolution.
Yeah, the resolution, because we're getting a clue of how the story's going to end. Oops. The detail of the narrator telling this story from a jail cell leads the reader to infer that he will be convicted of a crime by the end of the story, right? That's what we've been saying out loud, but we didn't include it on our paper. And then what I added right here, I know I'm going a little quickly. I just want to make sure that we have enough time to finish this part. I added, additionally, this contributes to Poe's development of the theme of blank by blank. So I want you to look at the abstract nouns that we talked about. And since this is a different piece of evidence, it's probably not going to be the same theme that we talked about with the telltale heart, and that's okay. But I want you to think of what theme, what abstract noun does this piece of evidence relate to the best?
I would say maybe insanity.
Okay, why do you think insanity?
Maybe just because we know that he did something insane throughout the text, like we know he's insane from the beginning.
Okay. I think you could write a good analysis for that theme of insanity, especially with the information and the evidence that he ended up in jail, and we know why he ended up in jail. Does anyone else have a different abstract noun that they think relates to this piece of evidence?
I think maybe remorse, because it shows that he's in jail and he's like ashamed of what he did.
Yeah, I was kind of leaning that way as well. I think that when it says I am almost ashamed to own, that made me kind of think guilt or remorse. But again, I think you could still definitely do insanity. I think you could do violence because he was in jail because of murder. But with the addition of the word ashamed, that made me kind of lean a little bit more towards guilt and remorse. I know that language arts sometimes is really difficult for some people because there's no clear right answer a lot of times. And especially in writing, there's so many things that you could write and you could analyze and you would still be right. So again, you really could prove any of these, but I think that the word ashamed relates the closest to guilt or remorse. So I'm going to say this contributes to Poe's development of theme of remorse by the narrator confessing that he is ashamed of his actions. So when I did this activity with my face-to-face class yesterday, and we went through and we created this paragraph together, so many of them were saying things like, oh my gosh, are you kidding me? Is that really what our paragraphs should look like? That's too much. That's so long. It's just too much. Miss Pickard, what are you doing to us? That's what they were saying yesterday. So if you are feeling like that now, I want you to know that you are not alone. And I also want you to know that it takes a lot of practice to get to this level of writing. However, if you kind of approach writing like a puzzle or even like a math formula and you break down all the different pieces, there really is a formula or a puzzle system that you are just filling in the blanks. And if you figure out that formula, you will be successful at writing any sort of analytical paper, paragraph, anything like that. So again, our topic sentence and our thesis guides our entire focus. So if our thesis had to do with propelling plot and developing theme, our elaboration should be focused on how our evidence does that. And that is exactly what we did here. We found evidence that related to our first reason, you could say, whenever you guys are writing essays, you always say reason 1, reason 2, reason 3, right? So we found evidence that related to this, and then in our elaboration, we proved how our evidence, based on setting, move the plot forward and develops theme. Again, this looks like a lot of writing, but as far as our actual brain work, each piece of elaboration was 3 sentences. So we wrote 6 sentences in this entire time, but those 6 sentences make for a really strong paragraph that has analyzed setting in relation to plot and theme at a very high level. Okay, so I wanted to do this with you guys together today because I want you to have a model and a template moving forward when you do your other 2 body paragraphs on your own. I want you to be able to kind of model your elaboration after this process. So your elaboration should also probably be about 3 sentences, and you probably can even use the same sentence starters or the same template that we did here, right? We went through step by step and we talked about how our evidence related to plot and then how our evidence related to theme. So when you are working tomorrow on your other paragraphs independently, I want you to be looking back at this example of the setting paragraph in order to help you with your elaboration in the future, okay? I'm going to go ahead and stop the video, and then if you have any questions, you can let me know.